Great. I hope this has been a great conference for you so far. We're really humbled by the turnout that we've had. As Gunjan mentioned, I'm the VP of Marketing at Databricks. Databricks is the organizer of the Spark Summit. We're also the creators of the Apache Spark project. So a big shout out to my Databricks people in the crowd here. We have guys and gals, so thanks for coming. So I want to talk a little bit today about the leaky pipeline problem. I know Gunjan kind of touched upon it a little bit, and I just wanted to build a little bit more on it. So women today are still underrepresented in tech and big data. It's a known fact. You guys have all heard this. We've talked about the topic ad nauseum, but this still, requires a lot of change and top-down structure in companies in terms of how people approach hiring, education, recruiting, mentoring, a broad range of topics, right? So let's look at, we're at a big data conference, so it's all about data. Let's take a look at some data here. So 23% of technical jobs in the US today are held by women. 17% of women make it to the C-suite, right? 8% of CIOs in the US are women. There's just quite staggeringly low numbers. 7% of US tech startups are women-owned, and this was a really interesting statistic for me when I was researching this. Women entrepreneurs begin with approximately 1/8 the amount of funding when compared to their male counterparts when they go out and raise funding to do their own venture-funded startup. So that is a very interesting fact. Part of this could be a low vote of confidence, right? No track record, and these are very current statistics. And now, with this rate of progress, if we don't actually get together and do the kind of things that we're doing right now, such as women in big data, as executives in companies, if we don't start to look at our hiring, recruiting, mentoring, retention cultures, it's going to take us, till about 2133 for us to actually close this gender gap, according to the World Economic Forum. So to me, this is a staggering problem. As a woman in tech, I started out as an engineer, 23 years as an engineering manager, product manager, and now I run marketing for technical companies, and it's a very, very interesting problem, one very close to my heart. As a woman, a mother of 3 daughters, I worry about kind of the work environment that is going to be there for them when they're ready to graduate and go out there and tackle the big bad world. So why does this gender gap still persist? So we've talked a lot about, women, girls entering STEM, right? It is not for want of, I think, girls not being interested in maths and science. I draw from very personal experiences. I look at my 3 girls. All 3 of them were very technically astute. They write code like it's a game for them. It's nothing. It's not because they're drawn away from science, math, engineering, programming. It's very natural to them. But will they choose careers in STEM? It's a very different thing to actually being interested in the subject matter to actually wanting to spend the next 50, 60 years of your life in a certain space, in a certain domain, right? And secondly, what we'll talk about a little bit is this leaky pipeline topic. And I know Crystal talked about it at the last Spark Summit too, so I wanted to kind of deep dive on that a little bit. And the leaky pipeline is really, addresses sort of retention in the workforce. And then thirdly, I wanted to touch a little bit upon what I call the network effect. And so for today's talk, really, I want to focus a little bit on the leaky pipeline and the network effect. Let's leave the STEM topic. I think we could spend a couple of hours on that one in terms of encouraging girls to get into STEM. So what exactly is the leaky pipeline issue? So this is a chart from the Innate Borg Institute's 2015 report. The leaky pipeline actually, is all about retention of women from the time they start, enter the workforce, say as a young engineer, till they achieve sort of executive level positions. And the statistics are that there's a 50% decline in representation of women from entry to exec levels. You just have to take a look around. How many female VPs do you have? How many female CX level women do you have in your companies? How many women sit on the board of your company? How many team leads do you have who are women? I think we just have to look around us and ask that question, right? And it's quite staggering. So why is there a leaky pipeline issue? I think first and foremost, there's a lack of female role models. And actually, some of my Databricks colleagues and I were just talking about this when they walked in. They said, oh, we've never been to one of these women in big data talks, very, very interested to hear kind of what do you guys talk about, right? And why is it a problem? Why is it hard for women to kind of enter and climb the ladder? Well, what do you aspire to when there are very few women up there? What do you look up to? Right? And you don't see a clear path, a trajectory for you to build and grow on. And that tends to become an impediment over time for a lot of women. Lack of mentoring opportunities, I think we've talked about it. Very flippant we can be, but I sometimes think about how many people do we all mentor as women? One project. If you walk away from this today and pick one person to mentor, whether it's a peer mentor, someone more junior, really think about that, because I think we have to actually make a change by trying to actually do something about it ourselves. It doesn't, and tech careers in tech can range from engineering to, we have a representation here from our company, right? I'm in marketing. We have Sharon here from customer success, Maddie here from product management, Val, who's our head of, design. There are so many roles in tech companies, and women have such a diverse range of career options. You can start off as an engineer and not probably end up as an engineer in tech. And these are all, options are available to you, but you kind of need to know how, where do I seek those opportunities? How do I make it happen, right? Is there a blueprint for me? Is there a roadmap that I can work through? And then the third most sort of, pertinent one is work-life challenges. Ironically, biologically, we're still the only ones who can have children. That might change. But it's something that we all go through. If we choose to have a family, now you are presented with a situation of juggling your career, juggling your family, juggling all the unexpected things that come with that, but still not having changed, having those same desires of wanting to be intellectually stimulated, wanting to, give back to your organization, do interesting intellectual work, and obviously, there's financial, remuneration as well. That many of us go to work because we have to, work-life challenges really impede this. This is not a trivial issue. I have 3 kids, so I will tell you, it's a juggle, and I think one of the things I've learned is to be a little kinder to myself. I can't be great at everything at the same time. So, I pick and choose the days and the weeks of when I'm a little bit more of a mother, and on other days I'm a little bit more of an executive, right? But it's a juggle. There's no formula for this, but it happens. And when that happens, you face challenges that many times your male counterparts don't. Now, I have a lot of guys, on my team as well, and many of these, fathers have the same challenges. They too have families to look after, and they too face these challenges. So a lot of these things we're talking about in terms of leaky pipeline, sometimes also, it does impact men, and it's not just sort of highly isolated to women. So we talked about the lack of a clear career path. The other thing is the lack of understanding of politics. We don't play politics very well. And I think, what's very interesting in organizations, like it or not, we like to sweep it under the carpet. It does exist, right? And I think women are just not wired to do that in general. We tend to want to just focus, hunker down. I'm going to do a really good job, and I'm going to move on. In a sense, and we're talking about the leaky pipeline, which is climbing the ladder to an executive level, you've got to learn to swim with the sharks a little bit. Yeah, it's a game. The other thing is a perceived lack of skills and experience. So, once again, when you have 2 candidates that come and interview for an executive level job, is there a tendency to want to hire the more qualified person? What denotes qualification? Is there a perceived notion of the lack of skills and experience when you're looking at the female candidate versus the male, right? Now, the other thing is feeling isolated and not supported, which is where groups like Women in Big Data are extremely valuable, right? Trying to do more of those. And it don't necessarily always have to be large organized events. They can be do luncheons at work, get out and go get coffee, do something where you're supporting each other. Because most probably, if you're facing something, 3 other women in your organization are probably feeling the same. So how do you support each other? The other thing I want to touch upon is gender stereotyping. This, to me, is actually quite interesting. There is a perception, right, of sort of gender norms in general. And I don't know if many of you have experienced this, maybe not, but I can certainly tell you I have. Women tend to be more empathetic. We care. As a manager, I know I care a lot about my team, my people. They're, to me, wherever I am, that's my family, right? And I think what's really important, interesting to see is when, as a leader, a team lead, a manager, an executive, you tend to be more empathetic. You are viewed to be a little less. A little too caring and a little less competent in your job, because you're not facing these hard problems. The other gender stereotype is if you are known to be, you go out and you get what you want, you push back. Sometimes the gender stereotyping is you're a little aggressive and assertive. So I don't know how many times in your careers you've had performance reviews where you've been told best performer on the team, but a little aggressive and assertive, right? So it's happened to many of us before. I mean, I can tell you in my 23 years in the workforce, it's happened to me. But I would keep going. Be aggressive, be assertive, be respectful, always, but push. So I want to talk a little bit about women in our field, in big data, in data science. So Spark Summit East, 2017, we're here. 14% of our attendees are women. And 10% of our speakers are women. And I can tell you, because I'm on the committee that works on these, selecting our speakers all the way from the Keynote lineup to others, it's not for a lack of trying and promoting. We just don't have women. It doesn't mean there are not enough female data scientists, data engineers out there that are extremely qualified, working on cool projects to submit for the call for papers. They just don't. They just don't. I mean, Strata San Jose last year, 74 out of the 394 women were speakers. These are really sad numbers, guys. We should be doing something about this. And part of the reason why a lot of women don't go to conferences is we don't network. We want to stay at work. We want to focus on work. We want to do really well at work. And we don't spend time enriching our skills and networking. I do that sometimes too. I'm at fault, so I can say that it's a problem that we all share. But I think we should look at these statistics and figure out what we can do to really impact some change. So Claudia Perlich, she's actually one of the top data scientists in the U.S. She had a really interesting perspective in an article, in an interview she did for Wired, and she said, many women in data science are simply not seen in the right places, just not there. It doesn't mean there aren't women in data science, they're just not there. And many of her female friends have chosen to stay in academia. These women are extremely qualified, postdocs in many cases, domain scientists, highly, professional women. They've chosen to stay in academia, one, because it was they felt it was the right thing to do. It was just a natural transition. That's where they saw their female role models. And secondly, you know what? It gave them predictable hours, predictable vacation time, and tenure, which meant you didn't have to shift around looking for a new school district, which is a consideration. And obviously, she said, another perspective was 10 years ago, having an advanced degree that was equivalent to data science was not exactly sought after by the industry. It was more sort of in research and academia. Now that pendulum has definitely swung, right? It's shifted. You see so many data science companies, data analytics companies, big data companies out there, and more women kind of joining these organizations. And we've got to do more to start to push that. So we move on to what I call the network effect. So hiring, what's the best way to hire? It's never through a job ad, right? It's always through referrals and networking in general. I mean, some of the more interesting opportunities I've had in my career have been through, other people, referring me, recruiting me, finding me. It's never been through a job ad that I saw and applied for. So when it comes to referrals and recommendations, there's a problem, though, because people tend to recommend people much like themselves. So if there are more men in the workforce and more men in big data, they're going to recommend more men. It just is a natural tendency. 64%, there was a study that said 64% of employees recommend candidates of the same gender. It's a natural tendency. And for exec high-tech jobs, referred candidates are much more likely to be men than women. So statistics, I didn't make any of these up. So you have the sources down there. I don't know if any of you have heard of what one calls the unconsciously biased address book. I found this actually quite fascinating. It's called the 20% problem. Rick Clow, who is a partner at Google Ventures, did an experiment. So he looked at 1,900 people in his address book, right? He said 399 of those people were women. He matched that up with who he follows on Twitter. 79.7% of the people he followed on Twitter were men. And today his address book is 79.9% men. So interesting to kind of ponder that data point and think about, who do we recommend for the job? Who do you want on your team for the most difficult project? You're starting, it's not just about recruiting from externally. Like, you have really interesting projects, the cool, difficult things, challenging things that come up where the person that actually does that well is going to have a high amount of visibility in an organization. Who are you going to pick? Who are you going to recommend? And how do we help more women be interested in those things? So we also do some interesting things as women, I think. We have some interesting innate behavior. So it's not all, the world isn't all bad. But we do have some interesting innate characteristics. One being that we feel uncomfortable to ask for a pay raise or a bonus, even if it's due to us. Even if you think, I'm like the best employee, I worked really, really hard, and I kicked this one out of the park. But we don't. Somehow, we're wired in a way to say, if I work really, really hard, and I think this applies to a lot of men, and there's some cultural norms here too, not just gender norms, but you always think, if I work really, really hard, that opportunity is going to come to me. I'm not going to go ask for it. Like, my boss should recognize it, or my director or my VP should recognize it. So we don't ask. I'll quote a really interesting example from many years ago in my early days as an engineer. So I was very happy, merrily going along, tackling some really interesting projects. I was an SA, so I was traveling through Asia a lot. I grew up in Australia, so I was taking on some really interesting projects, and I thought I was getting compensated really well here. I was happy. And then one day I go to the printer to pick something up, and I see a pay stub of someone who actually was just a year my senior. I looked at him like, he's probably trying to get a housing loan or something, so he's like printing out all these things. And it was the days before we scanned, okay? So I looked at it, I'm like, wow, he's making 35% more than me. 1 year more experience. So I thought about it, and I was very hurt, and I was like, what do I do about this? Why do they not recognize that I deserve more? Agonized, and I said, no, I'm gonna march in there, I'm gonna ask. And I know, I have this, I've seen it now. So I'm going to march in there and ask for what I think I deserve. And I did. And you know what? Interestingly, it was a faux pas. And not that anyone was being malicious from a management perspective. No one had challenged the status quo. And once I did that, it raised a lot of awareness around, looking at how we compensate women, how we pay women, how do we treat them fairly. And it agitated some, behavioral change with our management team. So no one was being, in any way sort of malicious, but I asked for it. But I did agonize, and I did think about it and go, why the hell am I not getting given what I believe I deserve? The other thing is we're less likely to self-promote. One being no one applying to submit papers at this conference. We don't want visibility. We don't want the attention, right? These are things we don't want that kind of attention on us. And so, it affects us. It's our own behavior that affects us. Now, this one I have to point out. We opt out even before we throw our hat in the ring. This one I have a real problem with as a hiring manager. Sometimes when I interview women and men, guys come in there and they want to sell me on why they're good at this, right? They have their game plan. They will sell me on why they're good at this. They will give me examples. Women will do that, and then they'll start to give me problems I might encounter with them if I hired them. Now remember, this is the first interview. You are not in the race yet. We have not decided that you're going to get this job. But I start hearing stuff like, well, I have kids, I got to pick up my kids from school. Now those are real reasons. I'm not downplaying those. But those become logistical issues once you have the job. Win the job first. And I've actually encountered this, and these days I actually stop people from telling me I don't want to know those things. Let's make sure you get the job, and then we will work everything out. If we want you that bad, we'll make it work, right? But don't pull yourself out of the race before you're actually in the race. It's just something we watch out for. We start to share all our personal issues, as if nobody wants to know. You're in there for a job interview, win the job, right? The other thing is we sit at the table, but often we don't take a seat at the table. So, often in executive meetings, you're probably, in engineering, as an engineering team lead, you're probably the only woman at the table. This happens to me quite often. I'm the only one at the table. There's a tendency, guys will talk and they will argue and they'll be contrarian, not because they're trying, maybe part of it could be bravado, part of it is they want to debate and explain, and we sit there going, I want to make sure I formulate what I'm going to say properly, carefully, make sure I'm really smart with what I come out with, and was it worth saying those things? And you know what? We don't take a seat at the table. You're not a player. You did not offer your opinion, even though you probably had some really important things to share at that table. And it's just a characteristic. I do it too sometimes. I'm do I really want to get in there and say these things? Do you think I'm self-promoting? We ask ourselves all these things, but it's important to, I think, start to break ourselves away from some of these characteristics. And the other thing is we don't put our hand up for some of the more challenging high visibility projects in promotions, because we assume it's going to come to us. We've kind of talked about this earlier in the presentation. See something cool, you're going to have the visibility, put your hand up. So, for me, I really want to embrace adversity with diversity, right? And in general, I don't like playing the gender card. That's also because as a woman, you never want to call attention to yourself as a woman. I want to go in there as an equal player in the room. And for most part, you have to mute everything about yourself that is female and get in there, right? And it's not fair to sort of, call out that men are making things more difficult for us. A lot of this is just, society, culture, norm, and what we've done for ourselves. So some of these things apply to guys as well. But I really want to urge you to be proactive, right? Ask for what you deserve. If it's deserving. If you've been a really bad employee, no, you don't go in there and ask for a raise. But if you think you deserve something, and it not necessarily is a raise. It could be, hey, I want to go try some other project, or I want to do something, I really want to, do something kind of cross-divisional or cross-team. Marketing's doing something really interesting, and I'm in engineering or in product management. I want to go work with them, or hey, I would love a rotation, or maybe I'll do my job, but perhaps I could do a side project, and because, maybe my goal is in a few years to become a product manager out of engineering, and how do I do that? Go ask. Be constructive. Don't come up with problems. Come up with sort of a solution, a proposal to what you'd like to see. And I said this before, right? You can't win if you don't play. So you've got to play and seek those opportunities and make them yours. They're not going to be easy, but you have to have the tenacity to want to be in there for the long ride. Seek out mentors and networks. I have been very fortunate, and I tell you, in my career, all the way through, to have had some amazing mentors. But I can also tell you, in my 23 years, I've never had a female boss. Never, right? But I've had some great mentors, and mostly all men, because I've been in tech for a really long time, and they have been tremendously helpful. I've gone up to them, I've asked them, help me out, I'm thinking of doing this, I'm, thinking of trying to take on another project, or hey, what do I need to do? Do I need to go back to school, or what can I do? And they have been extremely helpful. So go seek them. You don't necessarily only need female mentors. male mentors. There are many of them out there that are willing to help. And network. Spend a percentage of your time a week networking, going to meetups, not just women in big data meetups, they're great. Go to meetups in your domain, in whatever technology space that you're in. Go do that, meet with people. Also go to the other soft skills type meetups and groups and networking. I mean, if you're in engineering and you want to move into marketing, how are you going to do that? There are groups, there are things you can definitely go out there and seek, and you will meet others, and it will be a stepping stone. Don't just be the utility technical player. As an engineer, many of you on that team, make yourself visible. And I think as I said, you want to embrace adversity with diversity, right? The fact that you're the only woman or you're the minority, you stand out. So use that to your advantage. People will notice you. You become more memorable in that room, in that project. So take that and run with it. So embrace your inner girl. I wrote this in one of the papers. What I mean by this is, don't try and be a guy. People actually don't want us to play golf and do all those there was a time, women tried to do everything to get into the corporate, into the boardroom that guys did. Be yourself, be unique and be genuine, be yourself, and win in your own right. And I think guys and girls will appreciate the fact that, you are being genuine to yourself. And my parting words are to stay hungry. Don't give up. Stay hungry. Lots of work for us to do. 2133, year 2133 for us to bridge that gap is far too long. So let's do something about that. And I love Margaret Thatcher because she says has some really great sayings. One is that there's a place in hell for women who don't help other women. My favorite saying. And the other more positive one is to plan your work for today and every day, and then work your plan. Right? Thank you for having me.